All right, I'm going to go away, Greg.
Okay, Robin.
Not too far, I hope.
That's right. Don't go too far
Maybe
away.
to the kitchen for a minute. All
Okay.
right.
As long as I go
See you,
in the
Robin.
kitchen, take inventory, and I'll find you.
Bob.
Thank you, Robin. You're muted.
Don't forget the chat.
It's already open.
Okay.
I'm waiting for you.
Okay, Greg, you should see it.
And there's Mochi. All right, give me a second. Give me a second. Got it. All right, give me a minute to do some shares. Looking good, pal. So,
Okay, dude.
hang on.
Oh, yeah.
Hang on. I just gotta get the right things back on my screen. And then we can start. I promise. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Let me just tell Mozart to stop playing piano.
Making that guy stop. Why would you want to?
Want to?
When you make him stop and then you have to listen to me, please.
I know.
I'd rather listen to him.
Alrighty, here we go. And take it, Greg.
Welcome, welcome everyone. It's 6:05 on Monday night. You're listening to the 232nd installment of the Age on Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. If you're new to the show, I'm the founder and executive director of Age on Angels. We provide one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to thrive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face when they don't have a proper safety net. And this program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben's on the big board tonight. Robin is producing, so good to have both of you with me, and so good to have you listening from your computers in your cars, in New Jersey, around the country, and even beyond. Now, please take a moment if you're looking at us on Facebook or YouTube and hit all the buttons for me. Not if you're driving, okay? If you're driving, hit the buttons later. But we need you to like and subscribe and share because this is going to be relevant to everyone in your world. What we're talking about tonight, which is, basically child sex trafficking, is a scourge in our culture and needs to be eradicated. And we need to do this all together. We can't do that as one person or one agency. And so I need you to share this stuff because you know you're not going to hear this on the nightly news. And tonight, we're going to be talking more about human trafficking. We'll get to that immediately after I ask you the same thing I asked you last week, and thankfully everyone complied, which is don't take this political. This is not a political thing. We're not hunting down people in the basement of pizza restaurants. But we do need to find a way to work together to find how to keep this from happening. And this is not, sex trafficking isn't Republican or Democrat. It's disgusting. All right, so quickly, just a quick review from last week. What is human trafficking? And victimizes an estimated 25 million people around the world. 80% of those are victims of forced labor and 20% are victims of actual sex trafficking. So 20% of 25 million. It's just too huge to think about. In the past 5 years, DHS fiscal years, DHS received 6,171 reports to their tip line regarding suspected human trafficking and child sexual exploitation. Human traffickers and their victims can be of any age, race, ethnicity, sex, gender identity, nationality, immigration status, cultural background, socioeconomic class, and education attainment level. Traffickers can be relatives, friends, politically connected in their country of origin and operating alone or as part of gangs or transnational criminal organizations. Traffickers use various forms of force, fraud, and coercion to control and exploit victims. This might include imposing debt, fraudulent employment opportunities, false promises of marriage or of a better life, psychological coercion, and violence or threats of violence. Child sexual exploitation involves victimizing a minor for sexual gratification or some other personal or financial advantage. It includes acts related to child sex abuse, including child sex abuse material, which are pornographic images and videos of children, transnational child sex abuse, and child sex trafficking. A child cannot be charged with prostitution under federal law. When a child performs commercial sex acts, even if no force, fraud, or coercion is involved, federal law considers that human trafficking. And one of the odd things here I'm editorializing is that window closes at the age of 18. And at those ages, 16, 17, 18, that's when a lot of the children in foster care become the most vulnerable, because that's when they're the most brave to maybe run away from home and that sort of thing. So it'd be nice to see that deferral from prosecution be extended beyond the age of 18, maybe to 21. So then perhaps people who are 18, 19, 20 who have been in the trade for a while against their will would have one less thing to worry about should they report their abusers. And we'll get to that in a little while. To a large extent, now is more editorializing, okay? So don't think this is part of the article. To a large extent, I believe, this is me personally, that we have many cultural problems in this country related to sex and possibly around the world because we're so incredibly sexually repressed as a country. The Puritans founded this country. Where can sexual repression be found more than in a Puritan mindset? Somehow, and I think I blame religion for a lot of this, even though, hey, I'm a person of faith, but I have a lot of issues with the way organized religion controls the flock. So organized religion, sex became characterized as something dirty there. So in doing so, what we've done as a culture is spend our whole lives essentially defying science. And here's what I mean by that. According to the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, a woman's peak reproductive years are between the late teens and late 20s. By age 30, fertility, which we're talking about the ability to get pregnant, starts to decline. Now, similar for males, that fertility cycle happens in the peak fertility happens in the mid 20s, early 30s, according to WebMD. That says the male testosterone level and therefore sex drive is the highest during that sort of same period. Now, a lot of it is unexplained though, because if you think about male sex drive, testosterone level, and fertility, they coincide. Female, not necessarily so. Female's highest fertility time is like up to age 30, and yet female sex drive actually kicks in stronger when their fertility starts to wane, and nobody can figure out why that is. So much is unexplained. How is it that a woman's fertility and sex drive don't match? As their fertility begins to lessen, their sex drive actually seems to increase. So go figure. But here's the kicker. A teenage boy may have way more sex drive than a 25-year-old man because the young teenager, and this is what matters here, okay? The young teenager is dealing with an increase in testosterone as much as 10 times of what he's used to. So bang, his head explodes along with a few other things, right? He's that in that relative percentage increase produces a sex drive that's basically a combination of excited fury and abject confusion all at the same time. So what do we teach him? To just ignore the science and practice abstinence. And why? Why? Because some person who thinks they've read the Bible better tells him to. That's wrong. See, that's wrong. I see that as one of the biggest incursion into the rights of individuals is to tell anyone when and with whom it's okay to share bodily fluids. Now, like I said, I'm a person of faith, and I got to tell you that I'm a little bit of a Puritan too when it comes to all this stuff. So I'm not going to run out and start a bohemian nudist colony, but other people should be allowed to. Just because it's not right for me, doesn't mean I should, find a religious book, isolate a paragraph, interpret it for my own needs, and then tell everyone else what they should do. What would happen if we approach this, and I suggested this last week, and I want to continue it, from an absolutely opposite direction? What would happen if we encouraged teenagers who are young and strong to make babies, and we had it set up where they would be cared for? I'm talking about the babies, while the youth stay in school, and we're not made to feel like losers or like they should be ashamed or like they're ruining the culture for having a baby. Yeah, they're messing up this culture, but this culture blows. There's nothing about this culture that's friendly to people. This culture is designed to keep a dominant group in power and for us to look like and pretend like we're free. But come on, let's be serious. We've set up a social structure that is wholly based on religion. It is almost 100% contradictory to science. So what could go right? We don't talk about, nor do we educate properly about sex. There's that whole thing about you try to talk to your children about sex and they go, oh God, no, don't talk to me about that. Why is that? Because we've made it such a taboo that parents and their children can't even communicate. We treat it like something dirty. A ton of contradictory information hits the ears of us as adults, but certainly teenagers. The result is more and more late and medically induced pregnancies. And we're going to find out one day that those late in life, medically induced fertility rights and all this stuff, all the medicines that are being sold to promote this culture that we have, we're going to find out that those are the major causes of the uptick in different neurological challenges like autism. It's not the vaccines. It's not the vaccines. All the pregnancy drugs women end up pumping into their bodies to convince nature that she can do something at 40 that would have been much more easily accomplished at 17. But the way we're structured at 17, she would have risked ruining her life. Oh, there'd be somebody standing right there to adopt that child, to take that child away from her. There's no way she can raise it. Why? Because we got things set up so she can't. So she waited until 40 to have children because in our society, you can have babies, but first you have to have an established career and you have to be financially secure. And then you're allowed to have babies. What could be more effed up than that? Seriously, this is our lives. Look around, look around. This is our lives. We spend our lives in cubicles and judging other people. And then we get jealous when some 9-year-old girl becomes a millionaire by posting videos of her cat wearing funny hats on YouTube. Let's get to a real story, okay? And then you'll understand how the relationship of culture and home actually creates a feeder for the sex traffickers. Let's make it easy for them, why don't we? Okay, so this story about a male. By the way, there's this website called the Polaris Project, and if you haven't been there, go there. Give them your money. I've invited them to come on the show just recently, so I haven't heard back from them yet. And because the research and stuff on this topic is unparalleled. So go to the Polaris Project, give them a few bucks, and tell them I sent you. Anyway, this is a couple of stories are from their website. This is a male. I'm not going to say his name. They can say that if they want to when they come on the show. This all you need to know is that it's male because that's what makes the difference here. And he grew up basically in an abusive home. Small conservative town, okay? Small conservative town. He was taught basically gay people went to hell. Okay? This is the foundation for a child's life. And he believed it. His mother, very, very religious. Okay, always sensed that he was different. And I'm going to have to ask some of my gay friends if that's true. Like, I've never asked this question. Like, did you always know you were different? But maybe couldn't put a finger on it until you became older. But was there always just something gnawing away at you that made you feel like somehow you were miscast? He knew he wasn't like the boys that he went to school with, constantly bullied. He says because he acted a certain way, I assume that means he behaved effeminately, because, that's like putting a bullseye on your back when you're in school. And when he started to understand what gay meant, he realized it was not something he could change. And so he began talking to gay people online. And, there's a double-edged sword there. But again, it's just another example of how our culture sucks. Because why did he have to talk to other gay people online where the waters are treacherous? Why couldn't his parents have supported him? Why couldn't he have talked to other gay support groups locally so we know who the people are? Why not? Why are those taboo in our culture? Because this is what happens to this boy, okay? His father one day found his cell phone and read some of the messages that were on his cell phone. So now his father, now the cat's out of the bag, right? So what does his father do? Beats the crap out of him. There. So the kid calls the police on the father. And what did the police do? Nothing. They say, go home and work it out. Why? Because police are completely unequipped to handle something like that. Completely unequipped. That's not a flaw in police officers. That's a flaw in the policing structure. And that's something that needs to be addressed. You can't respond to domestic issues if only they're the ones you can relate to. You see that on cops all the time, right? A man and woman fight, bang, the police are there. They seem to know what to do. Nobody gets shot. But put a gay kid and his father beats the crap out of him, and the cops go, sorry, pal, can't help you. You know? So now this kid is coming to a place after getting beat up, and the police telling him they're going to do nothing, that he wants to change. He wants to be different. The kid wants to be different. Okay. So he told his parents, he said, look, maybe I could change if I was in a new environment. So they send him to live with an aunt for the rest of the school year. Okay. So now his aunt lives in a big city. He's all alone in the big city at 15. And this is a quote from him. I started to seek the love and acceptance that I wasn't getting from my parents. You see, this is the lack of support at the home that generates this whole dynamic. Where does the attitude at the home comes from? Comes from the religion. It is crazy. I mean, it's no reason. They ruined their child's life for no reason at all. Okay, so he started to seek the love and acceptance that he wasn't getting from his parents. Where did he find it? He found it online with a 36-year-old man who he eventually formed a relationship with in real life. So we got a 36-year-old man and a 15-year-old boy. 36-year-old man got the sex he wanted. The boy was not running away from it, nor was he necessarily feeling abused. He wasn't cognizant enough of that. He got the love and acceptance he had always craved. Okay. And he thought now at 15, this is what normal relationships are about. Okay. Now, at one point, he did try to return home. But when he got there, nothing had changed. Well, the only thing that had changed was him. He had learned to accept more of himself. But his parents certainly shunned him. You know, at that point, he decided there was nothing wrong with him, and there wasn't, except that he was just too young to be involved in what he was involved in. And he had no intention of changing at that point. His parents told him he had to go to counseling, or, are you ready for this? Conversion therapy camp. Built out of religion. Again, I'm a person of faith. I have friends in all religions. I work in an urban environment, and guess what? All the pastors and ministers and everybody else, they're friends. Okay, but when the household takes this to the point where they shun a child, you have to realize that this is not a tenable cultural structure. Okay, so they told him he had to go to counseling or conversion therapy camp, or they gave him a third option, get the hell out. Nice parents. So he went back to the big city and to the man who he thought he was in love with. He was ready to leave all that. He said he even got help from a lawyer who figured out how he could legally live with this man, even though the man was, clearly abusing him. He didn't realize that then, but he knows it now. Okay, so eventually that relationship soured, as you can imagine. Nowhere to go, once again, lured by another older man online. This is where things really start to go south. He claimed he lived in a huge, beautiful home, made all kinds of promises about work and continuing his education and all that. And guess what happened instead? He then began the grooming process. Got him to go to the gym, put him on a healthier diet, Develop trust. Listen to this next step. This is so insidious. If you don't have any, if you don't have any um, sense of how this works, like before this show, how the grooming process actually works, listen to this, because this is gonna, it's just so well done. It's a professional groomer, basically. So then after a while, the trust is developing, is a healthier diet, he's ripped. Then he said he was a massage therapist and the kids should learn how to be one as well, because it was a good skill to have and he could always make a living with it. Okay. Now, since he was too young to be licensed, instead of training with a school, he said I could just watch him and participate a bit. And that's how you learn. You with me? Turned out, what kind of massage do you think this man was doing? He was providing erotic massage, and the kid was just the selling point. Guy was a trafficker. He'd post pictures of the kid shirtless on Craigslist to get more clients, and then have the kid participate because that's what the people were buying. It was degrading and terrifying, but the kid was too scared to leave. Quote from the child is, I felt like I had nowhere to go, and my trafficker kept reinforcing that to keep me under his control. Eventually, he says, eventually he fled. More damage than before because of the trafficking experience. And also, of course, then you walk away from that with a sense that you can't trust anyone, right? Then organizations like mine find you and you don't trust us because of the experience that you had in the past. All because of the parents. The parents did this. He says, I did what I had to do to survive. And we know what that means, right? He eventually wound up in Boston at the invitation of another man who had formed a relationship with him. Well, that relationship didn't work, okay? The man said he could stay at his home rent-free on one condition. And the kid is thinking, oh, here we go again, right? Somebody else going to take advantage of me. But it turned out this guy might have been a little more honest. His condition was he goes back to school. That was the condition. This guy was going to let him turn his life around. So he got a degree, began a stable working life, formed healthy relationship with his partner to this day, learned that what happened to him with the previous guy who trafficked him, that had a conclusion. And when he figured out, began to pay attention to the issue more, and eventually learned from someone that he knew that the man who had trafficked him was actually arrested for doing something similar to another young boy and trying to take him to London to prostitute him at the Olympics. Bold, so bold. He said he called the National Human Trafficking Hotline and told them his story, and that he wanted to help. The trafficking hotline figured out how to put him in touch with the prosecutors in the case, and he wound up testifying against his trafficker at trial, and he got 30 years. Now the kid's working on a memoir, so that's pretty cool. I mean, he's one of the few, I would say, small percentage who ends up being on the healing process instead of just being traumatized for the rest of his life. He's working on a memoir, trying to get a story out there in the community so people can understand how trafficking really works and how LGBTQ plus young people are particularly vulnerable to traffickers. These guys are expert at exploiting the pain and loneliness when you're rejected by both your family and your community. So he's trying to spread awareness. Maybe one day we'll have him on the show. The point he really wants to drive home about sex trafficking, the most important part to saving victims is realizing how many different ways we could have done something before anything as horrific happens to another person as what happened to him. So what are you, like, you go back and look at that, right? And you say, what are the entry points? we talk about this all the time because I used to be a medical writer, and we talk about when a new drug is introduced to the market, where's the intervention point? Where does that drug attack the disease that it's supposed to attack? At which point in the process of the disease does the drug hit it? And this is so similar in that regard, because if you think of being human traffic as a disease of our culture, then at what point, where would the intervention, where could that have happened? Well, it would have been real easy for it to happen in his home. That's the first place. If his parents had accepted him and then treated him in a supportive way, and by supportive means just accept the kid, shield him from bullying, help him in that regard. It doesn't mean you have to suddenly have a gay household or something like that, because some people just go off the rails to the other extreme. I've seen that happen to some adults. Suddenly they meet a gay person, and then all they want to do is talk about being gay and get the gay stuff going, and it's like a turnoff. It's it would be like if someone walked up to you as a hetero, cis as they call them now, but hey, I'm not that young. He comes up to you as a hetero, wants to know all about your sex life. So who do you do it with? How do you do it? How do you do that? What would you say to that person, right? So that's not appropriate. But what is appropriate is to support a human being. And that shouldn't be so difficult to understand. You know that foster care, and we're going to talk more about foster care in a minute, often called the pipeline to trafficking. The foster care system is frequently called a pipeline to prostitution. Approximately a quarter of the almost 427,000 children in foster care are 14 years or over. 18,000 age out every year in the United States, and they are immediately exposed to a plethora of potential hazards, and they are not equipped to deal with them. They trust all the wrong people. Lack of viable employment, incarceration, pregnancy, lower levels of education, homelessness. And so all those things just add to the feeding process that the traffickers just love. We're serving the kids up. That's what we're doing. We are, as a culture, we are serving kids up on a silver platter. And we haven't even started talking about the kids who could be trafficked in their own home. We'll get there, okay? Let's see. Just want to take a break for a second here. Something came in here. I just remembered watching this YouTube documentary on Russia's population decline. They're encouraging young women to have babies by paying them $180 a month for 3 years. They didn't mention what age to start. Well, I don't know about Russia. I mean, here, you'd go straight to jail if you were encouraging people under 18, to make babies. But China, along those same lines, and thanks, by the way, for that comment. China, a similar problem on the opposite. They curtailed the number of babies to, I think it was one per family there for 25 or 50 years because their population had exploded. So that's how they dealt with it. And they sent a lot of their female babies to adoptions, international adoptions. That was a huge thing from China 25, 30 years ago. That it was gigantic. Children were coming over here from China all the time. And the end result of that now, 30 years later, is they have a shortage of women. They don't have enough women to satisfy the nesting, we'll call it, needs of all the men who they let get born. So, and that's what happens when idiots, make band-aids to cover big problems. I'm not, there's no, like sometimes people will say that our politics is so bad here, and then they point to other places. No, other places suck worse, believe me. Bridges to employment. I want you to know that that's still going on, and it's hot as a pistol. If you are or ever were in foster care, we can get you through high school. If you graduated high school but don't have enough skills to get into the military or college, or even a vocational career program. We can help you do all that, and it won't cost you a dime. You just have to call me, all right? Don't languish. Don't let your life, like, put you in a position where one day you're a grown person with no skills and no track record, no career record, and so you're ending up living on whatever crumbs the government will throw to you, because there'll be less and less. There'll be fewer and fewer crumbs as time goes on. Don't do it. Don't do it. School has never been like this. This is the way. Right now, this is the way. Get in touch with me, okay? Get in touch with me, and let's see what we can do to help you get on a path where you can make, several thousand, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month. I wonder what you could do with all that money. I'll bet you could find something. Okay. Bridges to Employment. Get in touch with me, Greg at ageoutangels.org. Here's another real story. This is from a female. When I read this, I had to tell it to you just because I related to it so well. But like right from the first sentence. The first sentence, when I was 18, I took a joyride in my mom's car. The first sentence. I'm going to have to read this to you verbatim because it's a female voice and it's too powerful to paraphrase. But I want to tell you first that when she was 18, she took a joyride in her mom's car. All right. Well, when I was 13 and my buddy was 12, we took a joyride in his mom's car. And then we took a joyride again the next day. And we took a joyride again the day after that. And then I called it quits. Boy, that was like getting to be a little too far out there for me. And also at the age of 13, I was a terrible driver. So I had no business being behind the wheel of a car. I tried it once or twice and I said, no, this is not for me. My friend, on the other hand, 12 years old, could drive. I mean, he was good. He could handle the car just fine. So he caught the bug. Ended up cutting school for a month and ended up in military school. But that's not the point. The point is that she and I both had the same experience. We were both essentially stealing a car from someone in a family, right? Okay. Nothing bad ever happened to me. In her case, her mother called the police. Okay, the girl was arrested and sent to are you ready? Faith-based dorm. A faith-based dorm. And I know religions want to do the right thing. I know they do. I know they don't extend charity with the purpose of creating sex trafficking. I know they don't. Nonetheless, she says that's where I met my trafficker. She was pregnant at the time and befriended me. We met for lunch after I got out, and I really thought we were friends. Now she knows that she was just being groomed. The squirrel was trafficked for 10 years. My trafficker controlled if I ate and when. She decided where I slept and for how long. My experience with police during that period was entirely negative, not extremely, entirely. And I absolutely did not trust law enforcement. I have since worked with caring law enforcement professionals, and I know they are out there, but at the time, I never would have asked help from them. When people ask, why didn't you just call the cops and leave? I tell them, this is why. Many times, off-duty officers forced me to perform sex acts by threatening to arrest me. This is our culture, people. Are all police bad like that? No, of course not. But as long as that exists among the people who are supposed to be protecting us, there are just some professions where the bad one has to be the real odd one. We can't just say, oh, there's good and bad in every profession. No, there can't be that. So at what she tells the story, she said like this. At one point, we were living in an extended stay hotel for almost 2 years, and the owner definitely knew what was going on. My trafficker knew someone in the local sheriff's department So whenever a raid was coming, we would know and be able to slip out. So this is how this girl is treated. Overall, I was convicted 23 times for prostitution and related charges. The police knew who I was and what was happening, but they did not listen or talk to me. Instead, they harassed me, made fun of me, acted disrespectfully. They would say, oh, she's doing this because she's an addict. They didn't understand that my trafficker was plying her with drugs to force her into sex trafficking. She says, when I did try to leave, my trafficker always managed to stop me. The last time in 2012, I had packed my stuff and was going to meet a chaplain that I had met at jail who was going to take me to a safe house. Religion's okay there, right? Instead, my trafficker showed up with 5 men, took me somewhere, locked me in, then managed to get me thrown back in jail. And where was the chaplain? Where was the chaplain? Really? You're not strong enough to think that God is on your side, you fool? And it was back in jail that she says, I finally decided that I had enough. I was tired of life and I wasn't sure I even wanted to live. So she decided to share her story, and maybe that will be one less girl who has to go through this. And that's what we all hope that will happen from this. If there's one person who gets helped from this, one person, then think about that. Think about that. If you and I together, it's not me just spewing this out there. It's you sharing it with everyone. That's what matters. I'm sharing it with you. You have to share this with everybody else. That's the only way that this will even be curtailed. And if we can help one person, just one, then there's a place for us in heaven, huh? Many times, she says, we call the hotline for support for someone to listen to the story. She says she wants to remind you of this. We are not always at the right place to leave, both physically and mentally. If I called the hotline and I was told we may have to report your information to the police, I would have dropped the call or maybe not called at all, because that's what deception feels like. And she writes that there are many times when we call because we just want someone to be there for us when we literally have nothing, and we can have that 5 minutes of someone listening to us, that caring and human connection. But if she were to find out that the conversation is all documented and being passed on to the police, that conversation's over, because she's been trained that police are not your friends. Okay, and I want to give you this phone number right now, because if you're sharing this, I want to make sure that whoever is listening this knows. There is a hotline, and the number is 1-888-373-7888. Again, that is 1-888-373-7888. Or you can text to Be Free. And that number, Be Free, is 233-733. But if you can remember just Be Free, you can text that and you'll get to the helpline. And I urge you to do that if you are in that situation right now and thinking about getting out, or wondering how to get out, or worse, thinking about harming yourself. Of course, if you do that, it's 988. But you may want to talk to this trafficking hotline if that's the case, if that's your, where your desire to hurt yourself is coming from. They might be trained in a better way to help you. Okay. From the National Center on the Sexual Behavior of Youth, they offer the following definition, and this is comparing normative sexual behavior with problematic sexual behavior. Normative sexual behavior does not cause discomfort, fear, or shame, and is not coercive. Real simple, right? In contrast, problematic sexual behaviors by youth involve sexual body parts in a manner that are developmentally inappropriate and potentially harmful to themselves or others. And you as adults can learn to realize what these problematic sexual behaviors are and separate them from what would be normal sexual behavior in a like your teenager, so you don't go off the rails for something that really would be considered pretty much normal in the scientific version of how people grow up. Problematic sexual behaviors include repetitive sexual behaviors involving oneself or others that may be frequent or excessive, or include sexual touching without permission, coercive or aggressive sexual contact with animals, transmitting sexual images via cell phone, the internet, and other electronic media, and persistent viewing or focusing on developmentally inappropriate sexual media or pornography involving young children, or violence. Sibling sexual experiences also occur and are perhaps less likely to be reported to caregivers or professionals. So what a list, huh? And these things are all available, right now in the way our culture is set up. Repetitive sexual behaviors involving oneself or others that include sexual touching without permission, coercive or aggressive sexual contact with animals, transmitting. I mean, when you read this list, you say, well, yeah, exactly. That's why you go to the police or whatever. And you know what? You know what happens? Like what I'm hearing, I can't tell you this statistically, but I will tell you that what happens more often than not in my anecdotal experience is the kids will be told that they're lying. They'll be characterized as liars. And you know what that does? That just gaslights them to the point where their self-esteem goes deeper into the basement. Here's some stuff about California foster care sexual abuse statistics. This is about abuse in foster care. Many foster parents are happy to provide a loving and supportive living environment for children in need. They are. There are some good foster parents. Some of them adopt the kids, it's the daughter I never had sort of thing. Some even go to the extent of legally adopting foster children, generally ensuring their futures will be well protected. But even with their heartwarming majority, and I don't know that that's a majority of foster parents, but that's just my experience. A single case of sexual abuse in a foster home is one too many. Some predators take advantage of the vulnerability of these children and use the system to access them and sexually abuse them. A feeder program. Ideally, the placement of a child into foster care should be a temporary arrangement, and that is part of the problem, boys and girls. Part of the problem is foster care was never supposed to be this cure-all, end-all to, why our culture sucks so badly. The child should return home after a short while. It's temporary. I was in kinship care, and it's the way it was supposed to work. It sucked. It was a horrible experience. A couple months later, it was over. My family was able to reorganize itself back in business. Child should return home after a short while if possible. Unfortunately, system is overworked and understaffed, leading to children remaining with their foster parents for months or years. Children who are not returned home or adopted by their foster parents remain under, and this is a California story, so they remain under the California Department of Children and Family Services, which is DCFS. It's under their legal responsibility. And this legal responsibility is where it gets a little dicey. DCFS is liable for negligence and damages caused by foster care sexual abuse if the department knew or should have known that your foster parent was unqualified or presented a threat. Okay, so what's the rate of sexual abuse in foster homes? Compared to children living with their biological parents, those in foster homes are at a greater risk of sexual abuse. The foster care system must ensure the safe placement of vulnerable children and protect their welfare. Here are a few locally conducted studies that demonstrate the prevalence of foster care sexual abuse. According to a study conducted by Johns Hopkins University, children in the foster care system face a 4 times greater risk of experiencing sexual abuse than their peers living with their biological parents. The study also confirmed that group homes pose an even greater risk, where children are up to 28 times more likely to become sexual abuse victims. I'm gonna let that sink in for a second. 28 times more likely. And hey, don't think that sexual abuse doesn't happen in biological parents' homes. I mean, come on, be serious. That would be naive to think that it doesn't. According to Darkness to Light, which is a child advocacy organization, children living in foster homes face a 10 times greater likelihood of being sexually abused than those residing with their birth parents. An Oregon and Washington state study unveiled that about 1/3 of the children sexually abused during foster care placement reported the incident. And what would happen? Well, you'd get moved. Certainly, you'd get moved to another house. But boy, the consequences, the repercussions of that can be devastating. And once there are the first set of repercussions, the children will never report that again. Never. Research by the National Institute of Health. This is the NIH now, people. This is serious stuff. Conducted on 155 sexually aggressive teens and children formerly in foster care, showed that 81% were sexually abused and 68% of them suffered at the hands of multiple sexual predators. Research conducted in New Jersey concluded that once a child is in the foster care system, their safety cannot be guaranteed. 36.5% of child sexual abusers are foster parents. 80% of sexually abused children personally know their offenders. More than 50% of the sex trafficking victims recovered in 2013 during a nationwide FBI raids, more than 50% were from group homes or foster homes. The New Jersey Office on Child Advocacy report suggests that 37.4% of child sexual abuse offenders are institution staff. 20% of these predators are relatives of the abused victim. And you don't have to keep all the numbers in your head to know that this is just awful. This is epic proportions when 80, 60, 20%, when you talk of them as percentages, you don't sense the humanity of it. A percentage is just a mathematical number. You don't feel the humanity when you hear these stories from these kids. In 2017 alone, and just these numbers are just not always as new as we'd like them to be, because that's when AFCARS reports them. AFCARS is the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis and Reporting System. And we have to wait for those numbers to come out because that's the Bible in this industry. In 2017 alone, the U.S. foster care system received over 66,900 minors, according to AFCARS. 66,900 minors in 2017 alone went into the system. While some of these children enjoy safe placement, others are thrown directly into the homes of sexual predators. Many states have made considerable settlements to victims after being found liable for failing to protect the children under their care. In 2009, twins allegedly abused by their foster parents received a $2 million settlement from the Oregon Department of Human Services, the largest settlement ever made by the agencies. What the foster care system can do to mitigate the risk of sexual abuse. Well, what do you think, huh? I mean, do we really need researching to tell us this? We know they're understaffed. We know they're overworked. We know they're undertrained. We know police are no help. They're not trained much better. What else do you need to know? Seriously. The vetting process to become a foster parent has to somehow take that into consideration. It has to. But you know what? I will tell you that having seen the application for foster care and having seen the application to be a blackjack dealer on the floor of a casino in Atlantic City, which application do you think is more difficult to fill out? Which one vets you more securely? You know the answer, don't you? Of course. The Casino Control Commission. Maybe they should be doing the vetting. So we're coming to the end, and so I'm going to just skip over a few things here because I want to get to the money shot here. I want to get to the money shot because when you think about this and you look at it in its entirety, it is a problem of our own creation to a large degree. It just is. We have to accept that, okay? Now, it amazes me that people can talk about the sanctity of life, especially the sanctity of life of an unborn child. It's a big issue right now, right? And if you want to know where I'm coming from personally on that, I believe that once the seed is planted, it's a person. I just don't happen to believe that you should tell other people and make other people do, what you think. Right? But that's how I feel about it. I think it's a person. And that's a feeling that you get when you have your first pregnancy in your life. When my wife says she's pregnant, said past tense, bang, that's a child as far as you're concerned. When you feel that parenting thing. You don't know if it's right scientifically or any of that stuff. Who cares? It's how I feel. So I feel that way. I feel that that's a life, but I don't feel that it's appropriate to tell other people or legislate to other people how they should feel about it. So people talked about the sanctity of unborn life and then don't support that life once it's out into the world. You'd think if we truly value life, we'd find a way to care for it, throughout its timeline, not just make it be born, then basically say, hey, look, you don't know me. You don't know me, but I was fighting for you the whole time while you were in utero. Now go out there and make something of yourself. Oh, and by the way, if you're female, you'll be paid less than what a man would get for the same job. And if you're a person of color, forget it. You have very, very few opportunities and a much more difficult path. But hey, I got you this far, you baby. Good luck. We need what I told you in the beginning, a completely redesigned system to take into consideration the child, the family unit, the society, both micro and macro. And if we did that, wouldn't that be like a win-win-win-win-win-win for everybody, for you, for me, for the police, for the culture, well, let's talk about who loses, okay? Because when I look at that, I see a winning scenario. So why is it so ridiculously unlikely to happen? So please spare me all the comments to say, Greg, you're an idiot. That will never happen. I realize it's unlikely for it to happen. But let me tell you something. In 1976, I was working with a school program that was absolutely unbelievably effective. And I thought it would never be duplicated again. It was a private school situation. They had the funding to do it. And I said, public school will never fund this. Okay. And here it is, 50 years later. Okay. And that's exactly what I created with Bridges to Employment. Okay. The best alternative school you've ever heard of. So don't think just because I'm going to tell you why this can't happen, that it really can't. If we all work towards it, if we all work together, if we get those people along with us who have been guests on my show, who are working at the University of Houston and University of Pennsylvania, who are working towards redefining child welfare, smarter people than I. But there's a reason, and it's real easy to understand why this has slim to no chance of becoming legislated. Because so many people have their jobs. The government has invested billions of dollars. And that's the ship that we have to make a left turn on, or actually a U-turn on. That's the ship that we have to move to turn this child welfare system around, right? If my great plan goes into effect, hey, that might result in 100,000 fewer jobs in child welfare. Then I become the scourge of child welfare, right? That's 100,000 people with families and mortgages who bet on the wrong career, got a master's degree in social work, need 30 years to pay off their loans. And here we come along with our plan to eliminate the need. Eliminate the need from the lowest person at the bottom of the pay scale to the highest person at the top of the federal child welfare agencies. There's a lot of mortgages and a lot of other, let's call them trappings of the middle class, that are fueled by the child welfare, let's call it industry. Okay? Further retarding any attempts at real reform, there are also political PACs and religious organizations with enough money, enough power to create a national discourse that actually takes us away, takes us farther from either understanding a problem and solving a problem. And the thing about it that I think just drives me a little crazy, and I'll end with this thought tonight. We all agree that human trafficking is not just wrong, but horrible. There's more of us than there are human traffickers. Way more. Redesign the system to enable life to flow. And stop making it a bad thing when a person has a baby, for God's sake. We were put on this earth to be fruitful and multiply, if you believe that. So how about just believing it and acting on it and not punishing people for doing what it says to do and for what science says we can't ignore. And you know what? I'm going to go away from religion for a second. Let's just understand how what we're doing is we're telling people to defy the science of their bodies. Why? That's all we have for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for listening at home, around the country, and maybe around the world. Join me next week. We're going to have another great show. Thanks to our producer, Robin, to our engineer, Ruben. Music provided by Mozart. I don't know why he works for us. He must need the money. Stay safe, please. And until next week, remember, it's only Monday. There's still plenty of time to make this the best week ever. Good night, everybody.